Hi, everyone. My name is Catherine Gorley, and I'd like to thank you for tuning in today for another episode of the Injury Prevention Academy, a podcast brought to you by DORN Companies, the country's leading wellness-based pain management and injury prevention company. DORN is committed to reducing costs of healthcare and workers' compensation, as well as reducing lost productivity, which has resulted in over $120 million in savings over the last 21 years for our clients. Joining us today is Dr. Dani Kimlinger. Dr. Kimlinger is the CEO of Minds & Associates, a national business psychology firm, and has been recognized as one of 2021's Titan 100 leaders for Colorado's top 100 CEOs and C-level executives. She actually joined us last year on the Injury Prevention Academy podcast with an episode entitled Mental Health at Work. Welcome, Dani.
Thank you, Catherine. It's great to be back.
Absolutely. And I know that, when we last spoke, obviously mental health in the workplace is so important. And I really wanted to kind of hear from you as to what has changed since 2020.
Sure. Wow. Changed. It's a good question. I think last time we talked about there being more attention on mental health since the pandemic had begun. This has continued. We are seeing more organizations normalizing mental health through leaders sharing their mental health journeys. We're seeing more organizations encouraging mental health days, providing more robust mental health benefits, and also more creative ways to support mental health. So just a simple example of what I'm talking about is that could be trauma-informed yoga as an example, or coaching, online cognitive behavioral therapy groups and programs, focus groups regarding belonging and mental health. So for organizations that are not prioritizing mental health right now for their employees, they're simply missing the boat. Mental health has been cited as one of the primary reasons for an employee leaving their positions. In the Great Resignation, this is something that can be supported. And I just saw an article in Harvard Business Review with statistics stating that more than 2/3 of workers have talked about their mental health openly in the workplace, yet only half have received a supportive or positive response. So this is both through leadership as well as colleagues. So on the mental health delivery side, I think there's been a stronger focus on specialty networks with specialized training and lived experience. So those are a few things that I'm not sure if they're dramatic changes from the last time we talked, but certainly there are areas that have been highlighted, enhanced, or been more prevalent.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even just talking about it is such a large step forward because, even 5-10 years ago, starting a conversation in the workplace about mental health, I think was one of those taboo subjects. People did not want to hear something like that. So I think the actual communication of that has been amazing.
I agree with you. Absolutely.
Yeah. And because so many people in the US are affected by mental illness. I mean, the rate of depression for just the past 2 years has risen, I think, about almost 33%, and it means that it affects almost 1 in 3 adults. I mean, that's a large part of your workforce dealing with some form of depression or mental illness. And DORN launched a program in 2021 with one of our partners where we have self-care programming that pairs together mental health awareness and true wellness techniques. So what, in your opinion, can companies do to support their employees when in today's world that work-life balance is so often blurred?
Absolutely. And Catherine, I'm so glad to hear that you are pairing mental health awareness and wellness techniques around self-care programming. It's so important. And comorbid mental health conditions, such as depression, as you mentioned, can impact effectiveness of other self-care. So there are several things that organizations can do to support their employees. One significant one is to offer robust mental health benefits with minimal barriers to access. So we still see large organizations trying to compete in the job market that are offering embedded EAPs and high deductible health plans. This does not make mental health care accessible for most people. If they're needing to reach their deductible before they get coverage on their therapy or psychiatry appointments, and the appointments are, $150 to $400, that's not feasible for most people. And that does not make it easy. Also, to remember that one size does not fit all. So, even with the prevalence of technological solutions, this may or may not be a fit for everybody. So, just kind of a mind's experience point, we offer therapy in 4 ways. So, in person, via video, message-based, and telephonically. And what we find is even with the offer to every single client, most people are still preferring in person, as an example. Although we will say that the technology resources and the message base have been hugely helpful for some industries like emergency room docs or restaurant workers, or folks that may or may not have schedule flexibility, and they certainly are helpful to to people with different lifestyle and preferences as well. So leveraging your mental health resources, especially true and possible for an EAP such as us, in your FMLA, your work comp, your ADA programming can be huge. So can you have your EAP outreach those on FMLA and make sure, for instance, that they know about the financial services available to support them around the reduced budget if they're on disability and getting 60% of their wages, or the parenting or lactation coaching that's available to them if they are new parents and they need that support. So, I think that leveraging resources is really important and can be in coaching or legal services or financial services can be just as impactful as counseling. So other ways that, that an organization can support the work-life balance and mental wellness is to promote time away from work in the form of PTO and respecting nights and weekends as much as possible for people if that's not typically the hours that they work. So really promoting that time away, and we're seeing more and more studies that are saying that it's better to have more like frequent and shorter breaks potentially than like that one big vacation a year, because that's a lot of time in between that can be where that work-life balance can be blurred.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially when still a lot of employees, I mean, including myself, are working from home, now that work-life balance really starts to blur when it's so easy to go to your home office and pull up your work email. Now it's blurring even further than what it was when people were going to an office and then coming home.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I feel like communication is such an integral part of that between the company and their employees, and that includes everything from keeping that work-life balance kind of unblurred, as it were, but also having your safety goals met and really making sure that the well-being of your employees are kind of in the forefront of your mind. So in your opinion, what are some important things that companies have to keep in mind in 2022 when it comes to employee mental health, and really how that's even evolving today?
Sure. Well, communication to employees is important. It's important for all kinds of reasons, including their feeling of belonging. So, the hybrid work model does present both challenges and opportunities. It does seem that one significant difference in the last 2 years is that many job seekers expect workplace flexibility now. So this allows the organization an opportunity to think through different engagement strategies that include those hybrid workforces. So, are there specific programs that can bridge that divide? I think about several ways that wellness partners are starting to meet those needs, or have been meeting those needs, not even starting. For instance, even at Minds, we have a yoga partner that offers, 2 online classes per week, and it's live and you're part of that. So, we're seeing in our client base that more and more process groups are being offered virtually. That would be another example. And, the important thing that organizations need to keep in mind is that they need to equally engage virtual and in-person employees. So if your communication is primarily in the form of hallway conversations, how can you intentionally do that with the virtual folks too? Is that setting up virtual coffee, or just, like checking in by, giving them a call on Teams, or, just trying to make sure that they're part of that process as well?
Absolutely. And I think having, like you said, that yoga program, or having like a weekly coffee kind of check-in with your
Mhm.
employees, that's I feel like that's so important when you're bridging that divide between the workers on site and the workers remote, because I think remote workers can sometimes feel very kind of not standoffish, but very separated from
Mhm.
the workers in the office, and it can be everything from feeling like they're missing meetings, or maybe they don't get a piece of information that they really should, and making sure that you keep that communication open. And I'm sure you agree that will affect mental health.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, people like to feel part of and they like to belong. And we all do better with more communication than less. So, in the absence of
Yeah.
communication, we tend to make things up that may or may not be positive things. So, I think it's really important what you're saying.
Yeah, and from Dorn's webinars and think tanks this past year, we noticed that so many EHS, safety professionals, they're really focusing more on mental programs and wellness programs than ever before, by actually partnering their safety with HR. And I think there's been kind of a separation between those two for a long time, but now they're really bridging that. So, and how important is it to have mental health programs that benefit your employees on that long-term basis, like you said, like the therapy and working with their hours, but also short-term basis? I know Minds and Associates has critical incident support.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I would say it's incredibly important to have long-term support as well as an avenue for debriefing through, a critical stress debriefing or process group. Interestingly and historically, we saw stress debriefings and process groups mainly used when a tragedy occurred. So, if somebody passed away suddenly in the workplace, or there was an act of violence or something of those kinds of natures, that we would get those calls. And although we still get those calls too, we have seen a pretty significant shift into more of a proactive approach. So we're seeing organizations engaging more around disruptive events or changes. And,
Mhm.
this can include a team that's burnt out and, because of the pandemic or because of their work, and they need some skills and tools to help them. So organizations are bringing someone in to provide a process group, or there isn't an actual, let's say, event that occurred that's causing this, but they're aware that there's more burnout and challenges. And, another example would be, a process group for a leadership team that would like some help with, they kind of have a sense that their employees' mental health is being impacted, or they're taking more days off, or they're overtly making comments about being tired or depressed or not having energy, or they're seeing productivity decrease. And so, leadership teams are, deciding that it's a good idea to bring in someone, say, a therapist, as part of a process group to talk about how to support them proactively while keeping those leadership boundaries. And it's quite refreshing to see that proactive support there.
Yeah, and I think that companies understanding that it can be loud like that. It can be someone complaining that they're tired, someone, where you can see productivity go down, or it can even be someone all of a sudden goes quiet. It
Mm-hmm.
can be those two kind of polar opposites, and it all leads to someone, like you said, feeling burned out, and keeping that open communication, but also utilizing the programs that they do have with their safety and their HR departments that can mitigate those, whether that's an in-person therapist, or those
Mm-hmm.
technological advances, like you said.
Absolutely.
And I know that the subject of burnout has become obviously just a large topic. It was always kind of like, oh, I'm tired, I'm just going to take the day off. But now it's very much of, I'm feeling burned out. I need a day, I need 2 days to really recharge. And I know, like you said, the great resignation a couple of months ago, people were leaving their jobs. And I think uh, 57% of US workers today are actually reporting stress daily. And that's concerning, especially when you're seeing those burnout numbers really increase. So in your opinion, what are the top three, I'd say, drives or ideas that a company needs to keep in mind when they're looking to retain employees?
Yeah, I mean, what a great question. So three things. I'd say that the first thing is certainly looking at your benefits. So, are your benefits robust? Mental health benefits encompass a lot more than just therapy and med management. Mental health benefits include things like, maybe having that top tier EAP, accessible counseling and med management, because that's another piece that certainly our field is bumping up against every day, which is, we have a client that is, only has a couple of days of their meds left, and they can't get into, a psychiatrist or someone with prescriptive privileges. And so, like, how is your benefit partner combating that? Coaching. So this is professional and personal. Flexibility. People like to have control where they can. Mindfulness. Resources for personal and professional development, generous PTO, and a culture that actually supports the taking time away and recharge. So, I did a project a couple weeks ago with a team as an example, and they talked about taking time off, but, while they're on their PTO, they'll get, they're not checking their teams or their email. They've set their own boundaries, but then their colleagues or boss will send them text messages and ask them questions like, hey, I can't find this. I know you worked on this. And although we might have to do that, under emergent circumstances at times, like, we should, as organizations, should really try not to and allow that recharge time. Second thing, flexibility. We are seeing organizations work through these hard conversations. And can the position be done at home, even some of the time? So, does it have to be done on location? And, asking yourself, if so, why? Some positions lend themselves to more workplace flexibility than others. So, for instance, like an IT programmer probably can better work from home than, say, an ER nurse. But what flexibility can be offered, to that ER nurse? Could it be, schedule shifts or changes, 312s? I worked with a healthcare organization that had a pretty strict, it was a 5/8, but really they were working more like 10-hour days, and they were really looking for flexibility there because they felt like they were spending all their time at work. So can that be something that can be accommodated? I believe flexibility is a mindset more than anything else, a willingness. And I also think that, with the rising tensions of family care and work, whether it's a kiddo testing positive and needing to quarantine for 5 days, or, the stress of just family coordination playing a role in care. I think organizations, and we're seeing organizations more and more adopting that flexibility, but I think that's another piece that organizations can get ahead of. So the third thing is probably a culture of connection. So, that's maybe culture of connection and belonging. So diversity, equity, inclusion. Really, fortunately, there has been some movement, although we are not there, absolutely not there,
Right.
but some movement on expectations of organizations to become more kind, more diverse, connecting, inclusive, and equitable organizations. So we have learned so much as a society, and I think, we have so much more to learn. But I think the Great Resignation has been an effective way to hold organizations more accountable and keep growing in ways and at paces that we haven't seen before. So I think those three things, like looking at your benefit structure, and accessibility, especially on the mental health side, since that's what we're talking about here, flexibility, and not just can they work from home or not, but it's a bigger mindset of flexibility. And then looking at your culture and the connection there, especially around diversity, equity, inclusion.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Because I know Calm recently did a survey that said that 76% of workers, when they're looking for a new job, new career opportunity, those mental health benefits are a critical part of whether or not they decide to go with a company. And I know that within DORN's own therapy programs, within our own kind of program success indicators, it's really all about stress reduction, whether or not a program is helping and whether or not they would recommend it for someone else, because that's going to affect that culture, that's going to affect that morale at work.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
and
think
now,
that connection you're making there at DORN is just it's so important. They're so connected.
yeah, and I think keeping in front of that. I think a lot of companies can use some of those kind of techniques, some of those ideas to push forward more of that, like we said, communication with their
Mhm.
employees.
Yeah, makes sense.
Are you seeing a lot of that communication change, whether or not it's a large company versus a small company?
You know, we are seeing an evolution, I would say, in organizations of all sizes. You know, it's interesting because I think sometimes in smaller organizations or even really efficient large organizations, you know, there's often not big bureaucratic processes to make changes. And so I think that's where some of the smaller and mid-sized companies we're seeing changes. But I think large organizations as well. I mean, it's so important and valuable to have that interconnectedness. Um, so you know, absolutely, you know, and I think so. Yes, we are.
That's great. And I know when people typically think about mental health, they always think of, I'd say, more of just kind of the effect on someone's mind.
Mhm.
You know, that they're all just focused in on here, not realizing that mental health can affect everything from injury rates to distractions at work. You know, you're overlooking those workplace hazards, especially in high risk industries like manufacturing and construction. So what is that true connection between what we call physical pain and mental health?
Yeah. I mean, you know, there is an impact. You know, I think that the obvious one that we would think about is, you know, someone is working in a high injury risk position, they're struggling, their mind is elsewhere, they're more likely to be injured. So that's, I think, the obvious one that we can, you know, just kind of recall. But, you know, we've been involved in workplace injury work, both on the EAP side as well as on the case management side for work comp carriers. And in these cases, we're seeing the needle move to look broader than just the physical injury, but looking at the mental health component. You know, so an example would be a case that we managed where a driver was driving for work, and he had another driver who was under the influence. That driver was injured badly. The passenger, though, of the vehicle, the intoxicated driver, was killed. And you know, the driver that was working, and on the, you know, the one who hit the other car, you know, he went through a long journey on, you know, like surgeries, you know, he had a neck injury, back injury, all those kinds of things. You know, really took about a year for him to get his physical recovery in motion. And he was really focused on that, right? He was focused on his physical recovery. So he came back to work and started driving again and started having moments of stress and you know, self-disclosed panic attacks, you know, while he was driving, because he, you know, he was so focused on his physical recovery and whatnot that, you know, like that wasn't maybe being looked at on the front end. It was like, let's get him healthy and get him back to work. So, you know, really fortunately, this organization that we work with on the carrier side, they're really good about holistically looking at those areas. So then it was a matter of just, you know, like the case manager had checked in on his first day of work, and he said, gosh, I have to tell you, I'm really struggling, you know, behind the wheel of the car. And, you know, I had some flashbacks and I was thinking about that poor woman. And, you know, so getting him those, you know, supports to get back and, you know, and safely for himself as well as other drivers. So, you know, that would be one example. But, you know, supporting a culture of mental health at all times and proactively can help, you know, people engage early and often so they can get tools for their toolbox, so that if an injury situation does occur, they are more likely to accept that mental health support. They're
Right.
likely to be aware of the impact and hopefully get back to work, you know, sooner and healthier.
Yeah, and not just once an incident actually happens, but
Mm-hmm.
maybe, you know, before an incident happens, knowing that your mind is not on something, whether you're fatigued about stress, at home or somewhere else, that's going to affect your job performance. And having that open discussion as to, I don't want an incident to actually occur.
Yes.
And so often, Dorn finds that it really starts with the top of having those open discussions with everyone from employees to supervisors to senior management. That's going to affect the mental health kind of openness of different companies.
Oh, yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that if leadership can share, you know, just anything about their own mental health journeys, I think it's really impactful. I'll never forget Mental Health Awareness Day. It was October 10th last year, and I sent. We have a number of mental health benefits. It's what we do. We feel like it's very important to offer strong benefits there.
Yes.
One of the benefits was brand new to us, so I have used it. So I shared that with our team. Not sharing details about why I was in therapy or anything like that, or why I am in therapy, but just
Mm-hmm.
with ease of access, all of that. And I had a number of employees who just had either sent me a personal message or an email making comments such as, I just really appreciate you sharing this. I had one employee who said, I just would never have imagined that you were in therapy because you seem pretty steady. And I'm like, well, that's because I go to therapy. That's because I engage in mindfulness and whatnot. And I think,
Yes.
but it's so important because it normalizes that for employees. And yeah, so I think it's really important. And it took me a while, frankly, to feel comfortable doing that. But now I'm like, it's so important. So.
Yeah, it's just the normal part of your life to have
Mhm.
that those talks about what's driving you, what's stressing you out, and normalizing that kind of talk at the workplace. Just in terms of, like you said, actually being able to access those kind of programs. It's not just, well, one person at work is in therapy and they don't want to ever talk about it. No, this is
Right.
actually, this is accessible to
Right.
everyone.
Yep, absolutely. And we have some, obviously we're in a kind of a different group. Since we're in mental health, I think, it's different than maybe some other industries. But, you'll see on some calendars where people will have their therapy appointment there, and then, other folks that, may not talk about it at all, and that's perfectly fine.
Right.
But I think what's important is just to make sure that the conversation is normalized, and that you're, if you can, as a leader, to be transparent about how you keep yourself mentally healthy, that can be really impactful for people.
Right. And that's everything from, saying, yes, I go to therapy once a week or once every other week. That's great. Or it can be, yes, I took off a couple of days last month because I needed to recharge.
Absolutely.
Now, Minds and Associates has such a great approach to total well-being. What are the top components and drives of your wellness programs? And how have you seen those evolve to really meet the needs of different companies, especially coming into 2022?
Sure. Well, we think that holistic well-being is vital. So we do follow the 6 dimensions of wellness. So, physical, social, emotional, spiritual, intellectual, and occupational. But holistic organizationally and individually. So I'll just talk briefly about kind of each area because I think they're both really important. So, at the organizational level, it's to support successful and existing programs if they're there. Otherwise to help them think through building those. So by working with existing programs, it's connecting our services to theirs. Looking at training hours and career coaching as examples that can complement already existing professional development initiatives. Management consultations, they could be, part of leadership meetings proactively rather than just when a reactive problem occurs. Leveraging utilization reports. So, groups that, provide EAP services provide utilization reports, and they share a great deal of information about why people are leveraging services. They show organizational and personal themes to help uncover potential problems before they show up for work. So, an example would be if you're an organization, you're looking at your utilization report, 30% of your employees have accessed services for substance use. We know that substance abuse shows up at work last. So what can the organization do to combat this proactively? And conflict resolutions, gosh, that is definitely on the rise again. That's something that, as people are coming back together to work and, tensions are high around vaccines and politics and, so on and so forth, that a facilitator can really help to sort out those issues. And then just, talk about individually just for, a moment. We believe, that ease of access, the abundance of resources that meet the client where they are is incredibly important. So, multiple services could be needed all at once and relevant at the same time. So, an example of this could be someone going through a divorce and they might call in saying, I need a divorce attorney as part of a legal service. But then they could also use counseling, to support them around this big change and the grief and loss. And then maybe they also want to engage on the parenting coaching because now their parenting is going to look a lot different if they're co-parenting, let's say. So, just really meeting them where they are, having the services, because they can be all so impactful and all at the same time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think establishing like what you said, that holistic approach to workplace mental health and having employees understand all the different points of that, I think is so important. And as companies establish their own culture of safety, I think that could be a really large part of that. And I know that the company role in mental health is so important. I mean, so what have you seen, just to wrap up, is how important a culture of safety is within a workplace?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's vital. It's, I'd go so far as to say, I think the organization has a responsibility to establish a culture of safety, which includes, I'm going to say is really overtly, psychological safety and mental health. So, I think that organization is the holder of the resources in the form of, benefits, and they need to ensure that there is access. The organization has to be psychologically safe, has to be supportive. It should normalize mental health and do this through such things as discussions about mental health, as well as watching language and how they talk about mental health. So it's really not uncommon still to use language, even if you're joking or making comments, that can really minimize or discredit mental health. So an example would be she's a little off or something like that. You can see how something like that might seem pretty innocent, but can have a pretty big impact on someone who, is struggling and might want to, proceed to talk to someone about, getting that support. So words are important. And also, I think it's a process. We can all get better. We can always work on it. We're not there. We do this for a living and we're always working to improve it in our own organization as well as for our clients. So, I think it's a journey. I think there's, no better time to get on the journey right now and really enhance where you can. So that's what I have to
Yeah,
say about it.
yeah, and I love that you said that it really is a journey. This is not just a perfect, we're done with mental health, we had the 15 or 20-minute meeting, everything's perfect. No, this is a constantly evolving field, and having those talks with your employees will even introduce new ways that you can help them on that workplace front, because it bleeds so much into your whole life. We talk about work life balance, but even though we really want to keep work and personal lives kind of separate, it is going to bleed into each other. And so if you kind of acknowledge that and know that that journey is going to be made with your employees, it just makes it so much more beneficial to everyone.
Absolutely. I agree with you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Kimlinger, for joining us today.
Well, thank you. It was a great conversation, and I'm really glad to hear what you all are, incorporating in your, services at DORN. It's what you do is so important, and love that you're, incorporating mental health in the ways that you are. It's it's wonderful. So thank you
Yeah,
for all that you do as well.
no, and Minds and Associates has so many insights to that mental health arena that it's exciting to see Minds really kind of coming to the forefront of establishing those cultures. So
Thank you.
thank you so much. And
Thank
thank
you.
you to our audience for tuning in to Dorn's Injury Prevention Academy. Please tune in next time to learn more about the innovative programs and the steps being taken in today's world of safety.